I broke into an abandoned motel looking for answers, and what I found locked away inside could either make me a millionaire or leave me running for my life. My name's Samantha Carter, but people back home mostly just call me Sam. I'm 29, stubborn to a fault, and if there's one thing I've learned about myself, it's that I'd rather risk everything than live one more day pretending to be someone I'm not. Half a year ago, I was trapped in a concrete jungle, suffocating under the glow of office fluorescents in New York City. Every day was the same stale coffee, gray cubicles, forced smiles. The hum of printers and the click-clack of heels echoing off marble floors felt like nails on a chalkboard. But beneath my business blazer, my heart beat for something else. I'd stare out at the skyline, aching for skies bigger than skyscrapers, for silence deeper than traffic horns. And that's why, 6 months ago, after a shouting match with my boss that rattled the glass walls of our conference room, I walked out of that office and kept on walking. I packed my Subaru with everything I owned: books, thrift store furniture, and a battered suitcase stuffed with vintage clothes, and I pointed my wheels west. All I knew was I couldn't keep living a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. So I drove, mile after mile, until the neon glare of the city gave way to endless highways and sunsets, so bright they looked like fire spilled across the desert. I ended up back where I'd started: Silver Creek, Arizona, a town that smelled of sun-baked asphalt, sagebrush, and old secrets. Silver Creek isn't much on a map. Just a couple of blinking stoplights, a strip of tired-looking storefronts, and a long stretch of Route 89 rolling off into nowhere. But for me, it's the place where my story both began, and somehow always pulls me back. My family still lives there: Dad, who used to own Carter's Hardware until tourists stopped coming, and Mom, who can turn a single look into a lecture about life choices. Then there's my older brother, Lucas, golden boy, college-educated, tech industry hotshot, living in Austin now, always ready to remind me that success comes with a steady paycheck, a retirement plan, and absolutely no surprises. I'm the opposite of steady. I've spent most of my 20s running from one job to another, chasing sparks of inspiration that burned out faster than they started. My family calls it reckless. I call it refusing to settle. And as I rolled back into Silver Creek that first night, the desert breeze sweeping through my open window, I kept thinking, maybe this was my chance to figure it all out. I never guessed my answer would come from a half-collapsed neon sign flickering on the roadside. The Desert Rose Motel, even half dead. It was impossible to miss pink neon roses twisted around letters so faded they were barely legible. Once, this place was pure glamour. People used to say movie stars would disappear there for secret weekends, hiding from paparazzi and scandals. Now it looked like a murder scene waiting for a true crime podcast. Windows boarded up, weeds clawing up the walls, an empty swimming pool collecting dust and rainwater. Yet something in my gut told me to stop. I pulled into the cracked parking lot, killed the engine, and just sat there staring at the wreck. Because somehow, I felt like this forgotten motel was staring back at me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that if I dared to go inside, it might change my life forever. Growing up in Silver Creek felt like living inside a snow globe. Someone kept shaking, waiting to see where all the pieces would fall. My parents, Bill and Denise Carter, were the kind of people who believed that if you worked hard, kept your head down, and never made waves, life would take care of you. They built Carter's Hardware from the ground up. Dad spent decades tightening bolts and ringing up customers while Mom handled the books and remembered everyone's birthdays. For a long time, it worked. Until it didn't, when the interstate rerouted traffic away from town. Tourists stopped coming. Slowly, Main Street turned into rows of dark windows and for lease signs. My parents tried to hang on, but bills piled up faster than they could pay them. They lost the store the year I graduated college. Ever since, there's been this undercurrent of fear in our house, like the floor might drop out from under us at any moment. That fear wrapped itself around me tighter every time I visited home. Because even though my parents never came right out and said it, I knew they saw me as a ticking time bomb. Lucas, he's the safe one. He'd been brilliant at math since kindergarten, always winning spelling bees and science fairs. By 25, he'd moved to Austin, bought a condo, and landed a job managing tech projects for a company with a name so vague I still can't remember it. He wears blazers even when he's off the clock. He says things like synergy without irony. And he's got an opinion about every decision I've ever made. Every holiday dinner feels like stepping into a courtroom, with Lucas as prosecutor and my parents as the silent jury. Sam, why don't you come work in Austin for a few years? You'd get steady benefits, build some savings. It'd be smart, or Dad's favorite line. Delivered with that deep frown he thinks is fatherly concern. I just want to see you land somewhere solid. Sweetheart, you're almost 30. It's time to settle down. Mom tries to soften it. She'll touch my hair, smile sadly, and say, "You're so creative, honey. If only you'd pick something and stick to it." But underneath, it's all the same message, that I'm drifting, wasting my potential. And every time I sit at that dinner table, I feel like the odd piece in a jigsaw puzzle, the one that doesn't fit anywhere. No matter how many times you try to jam it in. It's not that I hate them for worrying. I hate that sometimes. I worry they're right. Because the truth is, it's exhausting fighting the feeling that I'm the family disappointment. And it's even harder to admit that maybe I don't know how to stop running. The day everything finally cracked open for me, Manhattan was drowning in sleet. I was sitting in a glass conference room while Diane, my boss, with ice for eyes and the patience of a rattlesnake, tore me a new one for speaking my mind in a client meeting. She kept repeating the words professional decorum like they were sacred scripture. And all I could think was, I don't want to die here, under buzzing fluorescent lights, selling ad campaigns for products I wouldn't buy myself, pretending I cared about click-through rates when my soul was screaming to run. So when Diane finished her lecture and demanded to know if I had anything to add, I heard myself say, I quit. The silence in that room was so thick you could have sliced it with one of her overpriced letter openers. 5 hours later, I was in my tiny apartment, sitting on a floor littered with half-packed boxes, staring at the city lights outside my window. 1,000 voices in my head were screaming, "What have you done?" But beneath the panic, there was something else. A spark. I thought about all the times I'd felt alive hunting through thrift shops for hidden treasures, volunteering on historic building restorations, watching paint curl away from old wooden beams to reveal stories buried underneath. I wanted that feeling every day, so I opened Google Maps, scrolled west across the country, and dropped a pin on Silver Creek. The next morning, I started throwing my life into cardboard boxes. Clothes, notebooks, a battered toolbox, my grandmother's turquoise jewelry. By sunset, I was loading the last box into my Subaru. The moment I slammed the hatch shut, I felt my heart skip like a record catching on vinyl. Because for the first time in years, I felt free. I drove for 4 days, through rain pounding like drum beats on the roof, through deserts shimmering gold under a blazing sun, through nights so silent I could almost hear the earth breathing. Somewhere around the Texas border, I realized I hadn't cried once. By the time I rolled into Arizona, the sky was blazing pink and orange, stretching so wide it made Manhattan feel like a shoebox. And that's when I saw it. The Desert Rose Motel, standing there like a half-forgotten shrine on the edge of Route 89, the neon roses flickering like Morse code. I pulled over, gravel crunching under my tires. Even from the road, I could feel the place humming with stories. It looked like it might fall over if the wind blew too hard. But somehow, it felt like it was waiting for me. And in that instant, I decided I wasn't just going to admire it. I was going to save it, no matter what it cost me. The next morning, the sky was a sheet of silver, clouds hanging low over the mountains like secrets waiting to spill. I couldn't shake the motel out of my mind. So I drove back out to Route 89, windshield wipers squeaking over glass, and pulled into the Desert Roses lot for the second time in 24 hours. The building stood silent, wrapped in desert wind. Shutters dangled like broken limbs. Rust streaked the stucco walls in shades of orange and brown, but there was a stubborn beauty clinging to it all. Delicate turquoise tiles framed the lobby windows. A swirl of painted roses still bloomed across the weather-worn facade. It felt like stepping into a photograph, faded around the edges, a place frozen in time. I pushed the lobby door open and stepped inside. The smell hit me first mildew, old wood, and the faint sharpness of motor oil. Sunlight spilled through cracks in the ceiling, striping the floor in uneven gold. Dust motes danced like fireflies in the beams of light. I started recording on my phone. My voice hushed as I whispered into the lens. This is the Desert Rose Motel, and I think it's got stories no one's heard in decades. A voice behind me snapped me back to reality. You know this place is cursed, right? I spun around to see a woman leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, wearing jeans and scuffed cowboy boots. I'm Carla Johnson, she said, flicking a business card at me like a magician. Real estate broker, and I'm telling you don't waste your time here. I slipped her card into my pocket, trying to hide my curiosity. Why's it cursed, I asked. Carla let out a short laugh. Because every fool who's tried to fix this place has lost their shirt. Or worse. She walked me around, pointing out warped beams, sagging walls, patches of black mold creeping up from the floorboards. But her voice dropped lower when we reached the back hallway. You ever hear about Veronica Lane? My breath caught. The actress who disappeared. Carla nodded. Last seen right here at the Desert Rose. Checked into room 14 in 79. Never checked out. Some say she ran off. Some say she's still here, waiting. A chill skittered down my spine, despite the warm desert breeze blowing through the broken windows. Carla shook her head and stuffed her hands into her pockets. Listen, kid. Buy a house. Flip a bakery. Hell, open a yoga studio. But don't sink your life into this place. It's a black hole. But as I stood there in the shadows of cracked tile and neon dust, I couldn't look away. Because somewhere beneath the dirt and silence, I could feel the desert rose breathing, and deep down, I knew I wasn't going to walk away. 3 days later, I sat in the tiny office of a bank manager named Mr. Hollis, who smelled faintly of aftershave and resignation. He pushed a contract across the desk toward me. Miss Carter, are you absolutely sure you want to do this? I stared at the stack of papers. My signature was already scrawled on the first page in ink that seemed to shine like blood under the fluorescent lights. I swallowed hard. I'm sure. And with one more signature, it was done. I'd bought the Desert Rose Motel for $95,000. Everything I'd saved in New York. Every emergency fund. Every dollar meant for the someday life my family hoped I'd finally build. When I stepped outside into the blinding Arizona sun, the weight of the keys in my pocket felt both heavy and electric. That night, I drove to my parents' house, my hands slick on the steering wheel. As I walked in, the familiar smells of roast chicken and cinnamon wrapped around me. Mom was in the kitchen, humming softly as she set the table. Dad sat in his armchair, glasses perched low on his nose. Lucas was perched on the edge of the sofa, eyes flicking over some spreadsheet on his phone. I cleared my throat. I have something to tell you all. Dad looked up. Mom paused mid-step. Lucas lowered his phone, brow already furrowing. I bought the Desert Rose Motel. It felt like the words dropped into the room like a live grenade. Dad was the first to react. Voice sharp as breaking glass. You did what? Lucas let out a low groan, raking a hand through his hair. Jesus, Sam, are you kidding me right now? Mom stepped closer, her voice trembling. Samantha, honey, all your savings, on that place. I tried to keep my voice steady. It's not just a motel. It's part of Arizona history. I'm going to restore it. There's grant money. Preservation programs it's possible. Dad shot to his feet, the veins in his neck standing out like cords. Possible. Do you even hear yourself? That place is a ruin. You've wasted every penny you ever earned. Lucas crossed his arms tight across his chest. This is why you can't hold a job for more than 2 years. You chase ridiculous dreams and leave wreckage behind. My hands balled into fists. That's not fair. Lucas, I'm doing something real this time. I'm building something that matters. Dad's voice dropped low, dangerous. You have no idea what you're getting into. Environmental problems, legal red tape. You're going to lose everything. Samantha. Mom's eyes filled with tears as she reached for my arm. Sweetheart, please don't do this to yourself. I pulled away, my chest heaving. I'm not asking for help or permission. I'm telling you, I bought it, and I'm going to make it work. Lucas let out a harsh laugh. And when it collapses around you, don't expect me or Dad to bail you out. My voice broke as I choked out the words. I don't need anyone to bail me out. I just need you to believe I can do this. Silence roared in my ears. Dad slumped back into his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. Mom turned away, wiping her eyes. Lucas stared at me like he didn't recognize me at all. So I grabbed my purse and walked out the door, and as I stood on the porch, the cool desert night wrapping around me, I promised myself, even if it meant standing alone, I would prove every single one of them wrong. Within a week, the Desert Rose Motel became my personal battlefield. The place didn't just look broken, it felt angry, like it resented me for daring to dream. I'd arrive at dawn each morning, crowbar and gloves in hand, determined to chip away at decades of filth. But the motel fought back at every turn. I'd start clearing a hallway, only to step through rotted floorboards into ankle-deep water from a burst pipe. I'd scrub a wall until my arms ached, only to discover black mold blooming like bruises under the paint. One afternoon, as I pried open a closet door, an entire section of ceiling gave way and crashed around me, spraying plaster dust and a rain of rusted nails. I crawled out, coughing, my hair thick with debris, heart hammering in my chest. The next day, the county inspector returned with a grim face and a clipboard the size of a dictionary. Sam, I'm gonna be honest. You've got asbestos in the ceilings, lead paint everywhere, structural issues in the load-bearing walls, and an electrical system that's basically a death trap. He handed me the inspection report. I stared at the pages filled with words like hazardous, non-compliant, and imminent collapse. My throat went dry as I skimmed the bottom line. Estimated repairs far more than I had left in my bank account. I spent that night curled up in my Subaru behind the motel, my breath fogging up the windows. I stared out into the darkness, replaying my family's warnings over and over. You're reckless. You're throwing your life away. Don't come asking us for help. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the tears to stay put. But they slipped out anyway. The next morning, I rolled out of the back seat, back aching, hair tangled, and decided I'd push through one more day. I'd barely made it inside when I noticed something that froze me in place. Spray paint, neon pink, scrawled across the motel's front wall. Crazy Girl's Dream Dump. My chest tightened as I stepped closer and saw shattered glass glinting under my boots, beer cans, cigarette butts. My carefully sorted piles of salvaged tiles kicked into rubble. Teenagers, or just people looking for somewhere forgotten to destroy. I dropped to my knees, my palms pressing into the cold concrete. For a second, I thought maybe this was it. Maybe the universe was trying to tell me I'd made the worst mistake of my life. And then, I heard a cough from behind a stack of broken chairs. A man staggered into view, wrapped in a filthy blanket, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. "Don't call the cops," he croaked. I blinked at him, heart hammering. "Who the hell are you?" "Name's Benny," he rasped. "Used to work here. Bellboy. Back in '79. I stared at him, struggling to process the smell of old sweat and motor oil radiating off his clothes. "Why are you here, Benny?" He glanced around the trashed lobby and leaned closer, whispering like he was confessing a sin. "Because there's things hidden in this place. Miss... things people would pay good money to keep quiet. I know where the vault is." A chill rolled down my spine. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Because just like that, my worst week turned into the spark of possibility I hadn't dared hope for. And I realized maybe the Desert Rose still had secrets left to share. The sun was barely rising when I unlocked the lobby door. Benny shuffling in behind me, clutching a coffee cup like it was his last lifeline. Dust coiled in the slivers of dawn light pouring through cracked windows. The Desert Rose felt eerily silent, as if the whole building was holding its breath. Benny wiped his nose on his sleeve, eyes darting around. "It's back here," he murmured. "Used to bring towels through this hallway all the time. But there was always something weird about that wall." We wound our way past sagging doorways and loose floor tiles until Benny stopped at the far end of a narrow corridor. He pointed at a built-in shelving unit, its shelves buckling under the weight of old guest ledgers, dusty lamp bases, and cardboard boxes marked cleaning supplies. "Behind there," Benny whispered. "That ain't a real wall." I stepped closer, running my fingers along the edge of the shelving. My skin prickled as I felt a tiny draft seeping through a hairline crack. "Okay," I breathed. "Stand back." I wedged my crowbar into the seam and pulled. Wood splintered. Nails screamed as they tore loose. The entire shelving unit lurched forward, then skidded across the tile floor with a groan that echoed like thunder. Behind it was a doorway. Benny let out a choked laugh. "Told you I wasn't crazy." My pulse jackhammered in my ears as I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The hidden room swallowed me in shadows. It smelled like old leather, dust, and something faintly sweet like dried roses left to die in the sun. I swept the flashlight around the space, and my breath caught. Glass display cases lined the walls, each filled with relics that shimmered under the beam. Stacks of vintage movie reels, velvet-lined boxes holding sparkling jewelry, silver cigarette cases engraved with swirling monograms. One entire shelf was packed with glossy black and white photos, famous actors grinning by the Desert Rose's neon pool, women in glamorous sunglasses, men in tailored suits. And right in the center of the room stood a vault, tall, heavy steel. The words Desert Rose embossed across the front in flowing script. Benny shuffled forward, eyes wide. "That's it. That's Harold Jenkins' vault, the owner. He kept stuff in there for Hollywood folks. Money, jewels, secrets they didn't want the world to see." My hand hovered over the cool metal, because in that moment, every doubt, every night sleeping in my Subaru, every cruel word spray-painted on my walls, felt like they'd been leading me to this single point. I twisted the vault's handle. It wouldn't budge. I let my forehead drop against the steel door, the cold seeping into my skin. Benny fidgeted beside me. "You gonna open it?" "Right." I lifted my eyes to the swirling letters on the vault, determination rising like a spark catching flame. "Yeah," I whispered, "I'm gonna open it." And I knew right then I'd tear this entire motel apart, brick by brick, if that's what it took to find out what secrets were locked inside that vault. For 2 nights, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that vault silent, waiting, daring me to unlock it. On the 3rd morning, I pulled out my phone and called Ethan Reynolds. Ethan and I went to college together. He used to be the kind of guy who wore tweed jackets, even in summer, and once gave an entire presentation on the architectural symbolism of vintage movie theaters. Now, he worked in historic preservation, specializing in antique safes and hidden compartments, the perfect mix of nerd and magician. When Ethan rolled up to the Desert Rose, he stepped out of his dusty pickup wearing jeans, a denim shirt, and a grin that stretched ear to ear. "Sam, you have no idea how happy I am you called me for this." He ran his hands over the steel door of the vault, eyes gleaming like a kid on Christmas morning. "This is gorgeous," he breathed. "Custom job, mid-60s, judging by the welds." "You sure you want me to open it?" I crossed my arms, trying to hide how hard my heart was pounding. "Ethan, either open it or bury me in the backyard because I'm not leaving until I know what's inside." He laughed. "Then let's crack this baby. For 2 hours." Ethan listened to the tumblers through a stethoscope pressed to the cool metal. He made gentle turns of the dial, his brow furrowed in concentration, while I paced behind him like a caged animal. Finally, there was a soft, decisive click. Ethan slowly twisted the handle, and the vault door swung open. I held my breath and stared. Inside were stacks of manila envelopes marked with names I'd only ever seen in old gossip magazines. There were velvet boxes holding diamond earrings so brilliant they scattered tiny rainbows across the steel walls. Silver cigarette cases engraved with initials, love letters bound in silk ribbons, and nestled in the center was a small wooden chest, its surface carved with roses, hinges crusted with age. Ethan carefully lifted the lid. Inside lay a handful of gold coins, each one stamped with the face of Lady Liberty, glinting like captured sunlight, and resting atop them, a diamond necklace that sparkled so fiercely it looked like it could cut glass. Ethan sucked in a sharp breath. "Sam, this stuff isn't just valuable. It's historical, Hollywood hush money, blackmail payoffs. God knows what secrets these things were meant to keep buried." My fingers trembled as I reached for a stack of documents wedged beside the chest. When I pulled them free, my eyes widened. Stamped across the top in bold red ink were the words, "National Register of Historic Places, Desert Rose Motel, listed 1978. My mouth fell open as I read page after page declaring the building historically significant, a preserved piece of Arizona's golden age, tied to cultural icons and eligible for federal grants and tax breaks. My legs went weak, and I sank onto a dusty stool, clutching the papers to my chest. Ethan knelt beside me, eyes soft. "You okay?" Tears filled my eyes, but I was smiling so hard my cheeks hurt. This changes everything, because in that instant, I knew. The Desert Rose wasn't just some decaying pile of bricks. It was a treasure trove of secrets and history. And it might be the thing that finally saved me. By early summer, the Desert Rose Motel was alive with the sounds of hammers, drills, and laughter echoing off newly painted walls. Ethan stayed on, diving into the restoration like it was the biggest adventure of his life. Together, we mapped every inch of the place, determined to honor its past while breathing new life into it. Layers of chipped paint gave way to the original color scheme, brilliant turquoise and soft coral, glowing under the desert sun. The neon rose sign that had hung crooked and dead for decades flickered back to life, each curve blazing pink against the deepening night sky. Inside, we polished the black and white checkered floors until they shone like glass. Art Deco sconces cast warm golden light across the lobby, where photos of Hollywood stars now lined the walls in sleek new frames. Visitors began trickling in, drawn by whispers of Veronica Lane's mystery and tales of hidden vaults brimming with secrets. People wanted to stand where legends once stood. Tourists posed beneath the neon glow. Instagrammers snapped photos in front of vintage motel doors painted in shades of seafoam green and dusty rose. I sold a few discreet pieces from the vault, small trinkets that carried no names. No scandal attached enough to fund critical repairs without letting go of the most precious pieces. But the necklace, the love letters, the gold coins, those stayed locked away, waiting for the right moment to tell their story. News spread fast. An Arizona travel blogger wrote a glowing feature calling the Desert Rose a glittering time capsule of the Southwest's forgotten glamour. Then a local TV crew came through, filming a segment that aired across the state. Suddenly, Silver Creek was back on the map. One afternoon, I looked up from reorganizing the front desk and saw my family standing in the doorway. Mom wore a floral blouse and clutched Dad's arm so tightly it looked like she might float away. Dad stood tall beside her, his eyes wide, trying to absorb the transformation. Lucas hung back, arms folded, taking in every detail with that sharp, calculating gaze of his. My breath caught in my chest. Dad cleared his throat. "So, this is it, huh?" I nodded, trying not to let my voice shake. Mom glanced around the lobby, eyes shimmering. "It's beautiful, Samantha." Lucas stepped closer, his tone quiet but genuine. "I'll admit, this is impressive. If you ever want to talk franchising or investors, I'm available." For the first time in my life, my brother looked at me not as the family wild card, but as an equal. My voice wavered as I answered, "Thanks. Lucas, I'll think about it." Dad walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you, kid." And just like that, the weight I'd carried for years of not measuring up, of being the constant disappointment, began to melt away under the neon glow. Because the Desert Rose wasn't just bricks and mortar anymore, it was proof that sometimes the riskiest dream is the one that finally brings you home. That evening, the desert breeze drifted cool and soft across the parking lot as the sun melted behind the mountains, leaving streaks of purple and gold hanging in the sky. I stepped out under the neon glow, the giant rose sign humming above me, petals blazing pink against the gathering dark. Around me, laughter spilled out from the lobby where tourists lingered over black and white photos of forgotten stars and whispered rumors about hidden vaults and vanished movie queens. I stood there for a long moment, breathing in the scent of dust and fresh paint, feeling the warm concrete beneath my feet. 6 months ago, I was drowning under fluorescent lights, buried alive in spreadsheets and deadlines, afraid that my life was slipping away in tiny, polite increments. Now, I was the owner of a once-forgotten motel, reborn in neon and history, a place where secrets whispered through cracked walls and starlight poured in through dusty windows. I thought of my family, standing here hours earlier, eyes shining with something I'd never seen before: respect, pride. I thought of Lucas, offering to help with investors instead of telling me I was reckless. I thought of Benny, who'd vanished as quietly as he'd appeared, leaving me with knowledge that changed everything. And I thought of Veronica Lane, a woman whose name was still spoken in hushed tones, whose story now danced in the reflections of my neon sign. If there's one truth I've learned from all of this, it's that sometimes the greatest treasure you'll ever discover isn't gold or jewels or fame. It's the piece of yourself you uncover when you stop listening to the voices telling you who you're supposed to be. Because the walls we break down aren't always physical. Sometimes they're the limits we've placed on our own hearts. So if you're standing at the edge of your own impossible dream, shaking with fear, doubting every instinct, I hope you'll remember this. No dream is too crazy if it makes your blood race. No risk is wasted if it brings you closer to the truth of who you are. And sometimes, the place everyone else sees as worthless is exactly where you'll find yourself shining the brightest. So take the leap. Push open the hidden doors, because you might discover the greatest part of your story is still waiting for you, right behind a wall you never knew existed. And if you ever find yourself on Route 89, somewhere outside Silver Creek, look for the pink glow cutting through the desert night. The Desert Rose Motel is still standing, and there's always room for one more dreamer searching for the road less traveled.